Welcome to the Candidly Speaking Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Burke, and we are here for part 2 of our series on how to find a therapist. Last week, we introduced the idea or the thought of considering going to therapy, and now this week, we're going to talk about finding the right therapist and how you can go about doing that. So we're going to dive right into this. So the first thing you're going to want to do is identify why you want to see a therapist, right? Is it just general life advice? Or are you going through something specific that you really need someone to talk to about, that you can't really find anybody to release those thoughts and ideas to? And you can go to a therapist for general life advice. You don't have to be always going through a crisis. In fact, it's probably better if you can do it when you're not in crisis mode, because when you're in crisis mode, you can't make decisions very well, or it's very hard to make decisions. So first, identify why you want to see a therapist. What is the why and what you want to do? The next point can be seen as controversial, but it's true. And you have to identify your preference, right? What that means is, do you want someone who can culturally relate to you? And that's not necessarily a race thing. That could be a background thing. Did you grow up in this type of home or that type of home? So maybe culturally, or someone that's relatable. So you want to find, you want to identify this preference. Do you want a male or female? As a male, sometimes depending on the situation or depending on, for our marriage counseling, I kind of preferred going to a female. But during my individual therapy, I preferred going to a male. And my reasoning for the marriage thing for female is I felt a female would be able to explain better some of the points or some of the things that my wife wanted to highlight. For me personally, a male, I'm working on me, so he can help me, go through this process as a guy, right? So that was kind of my reasoning behind it. It doesn't have to be your reasoning. You can have whatever reasoning, but just to kind of give you some insight on why that was my preference. You want to figure out what people specialize in, right? I interviewed a therapist, Ebony Clipper. I'll add her link to our video and her information. She did cognitive behavioral therapy, so does that person specialize in that? Can your therapist specialize in treating different conditions, schizophrenia, depression, seasonal affective disorder? These are the type of preferences that I'm talking about. What is going to fit the need that you have? Okay. So my third thing is, you want to stop, look, and listen. You want to tap that network. You want to find your friends and family that are already seeing therapists or already in therapy that can make recommendations for you. So if someone is seeing a therapist, hey, can you tell me about this therapist? Maybe this therapist can connect me with someone with this issue, because my issue is different from yours. So maybe your therapist can connect me with someone that can help me with this issue. So tap your network, people that are close to you. This is another way that you can go about finding the right therapist. Tip number 4 is about financial consideration. Okay, when we did our first marriage counseling, later in our marriage, we started out doing marriage counseling, but then later in our marriage, we went back. Our therapist accepted insurance. Not all therapists accept insurance. In fact, I said therapist, but marriage counselor, she actually stopped accepting insurance while we were seeing her, and she asked us if we wanted to continue to go. And we ended up continuing, but there was some other stuff that I'll talk about at another time that was happening with that, and we ended up finding a new therapist who didn't take insurance, but the counselor didn't take insurance, and the individual guy that I saw, he didn't take insurance either. So it can get costly. So if you can find someone that stays within your insurance, that takes your insurance, I think that's a great way to go. Or look in your local government for programs to help people find therapists, or find counselors, find coaches. Coaches are becoming more popular, and they're becoming more relevant as time goes on. But we're talking about therapy here, so check with your local governments to see what's out there. The last tip is probably the biggest tip, and I wanted to save it for last because I wanted to spend a little bit of time on it. This last tip is, you want to research Google, right? This is about finding that actual person, right? We've set all our criteria before, our preferences. Now we want to actually find the person. So Google is probably one of the easiest ways to go about doing this. And when you Google, you'll probably come across something like Psychology Today, or you'll come across different therapy, because Google will probably ping your IP and look at where you're close to, or ping your network or whatever, and see where you're close to, or however they do it. I don't know. See where you're close to, and make some recommendations. But the way that I've found people that I think you will find valuable, even if, the site is a Christian website, but even if you're not a Christian, I think you'll find value, and I'll walk you through what it is. They are not sponsoring me. I'm not sponsored by them. I listen to their radio show, but I'm not sponsored by them. So that's not why I'm recommending them. I'm recommending them because they actually have a really good service. So this ministry is called New Life Ministries. And if you go to their website, they have a list. You go for counselors, and you will call them, and they will give you can tell them what you're kind of going through and what you're dealing with, and they can help you find a therapist based on what you're dealing with. So they can help you find a therapist based on your criteria. And it makes things a lot easier. Now, the other beauty of this is that when you call them, there's a fee, right? A fee, but this fee goes to your first counseling session. So let's just say you found a therapist that you like. Their charge is normally $175, $200 an hour, and you want to go and see this therapist, and they pay you pay $99, and you get to have that consultation with that therapist, and you get your first sit down. Now, this is important because that first sit down, which is what we're going to talk about in part 3 of this series, it's very important for you to kind of date the therapist, and date not literally, but date kind of, see what therapists fit well. Because sometimes a therapist will tell you, hey, we're not a good fit. I don't think I can help you. And that's a sign of a good therapist, actually. If that person just takes you in and doesn't evaluate, don't assess, or don't give you any feedback, probably not a good place to go. So those 2 resources, Psychology Today, Google, of course, and New Life Ministries. I'll put their link in the video below. And my last tip is an obvious tip, but I think it's a valuable tip. Just make the appointment. You have to just make the appointment. You have to get the process started if that's something that you really want to do. Just make the appointment, talk to the person, see where they are, and see if you're a good fit. But in our next part of this series, we're going to talk about once you found the person and once you sit down with the person, what kind of things you need to do. All right. So thanks again. It's a Candidly Speaking podcast. Hope you found some value in finding the right therapist. All right.